Let's go through the shelving practice. The first part of this practice is looking at the difference between Dewey Decimal System, or DDS, and Library of Congress classification, or LCC. We don't have a lot of books that are still in Dewey Decimal, but they turn up occasionally, and it's a good idea to keep an eye out for any discrepancies in call numbers, especially looking for those Dewey Decimal books, so that when we find them, they don't wind up back on the shelf and lost. If you catch a book with Dewey Decimal classification, it's really easy for us to just put it aside, put a new label on it, and get it back into circulation. So make sure that you're keeping an eye out for those and catching them as they come up. In this first question, I'm looking for books that have Dewey classification. Seeing this 3-digit number here at the top is a good sign that this is Dewey classification, because Dewey books start with a 3-digit number as their subject. Here's another one, 3-digit number, that's Dewey. And here again, it starts with a 0, but that is a 3-digit number, and that is Dewey. Now, here is a 2-letter subject classification. Library of Congress is the one that starts with letters, so I'm not going to select that, and I'm not going to select that one, and I'm not going to select that one. Okay, I'm moving down to the next question. Now I'm looking for Library of Congress call numbers. And now I'm looking for the opposite, so I'm looking for call numbers that have those 2 letters at the front instead of 3 numbers. So this is Library of Congress, this is Library of Congress. This one's just 1 letter, that's fine. So I said 2 letters, but there are some that have 1 letter and there are some that have 3 letters. So as long as there's 1 to 3 letters at the front, essentially, that's a pretty good guess that that's Library of Congress. Now these are Dewey. This one has some letters, so that's Library of Congress, and that one's Dewey again. All right, next. Now, when I said if there's some letters at the front, that's a pretty safe guess that there's Library of Congress. Yes, but there is one exception, which is that our special collections also have letters at the front, noting what the special collection is. So, for example, all of our juvenile books at the very top of the number have JUV written. And that is not a Library of Congress subject classification, that is just how we differentiate our juvenile collection from our main collection. So here we have a juvenile book, JUV PN. Now I can see, first of all, JUV, not a Library of Congress classification, there are no JUVs. So you know that that's juvenile, and then right after it we have PN, so I know that this is a Library of Congress number going into the juvenile section. Here we have REF, again, not a Library of Congress classification. There are no REF books in Library of Congress, it just means reference. So reference, but then the next line starts with a 3-digit number, 306. So that means that this would be a Dewey Decimal book. I think it's unlikely that we have any Dewey Decimal books still in our reference collection because it doesn't leave the library, so I don't know how that would have happened. But it's possible that maybe the label fell off. So again, just like keep an eye out, make sure that you're not getting tripped up by this. And then moving on to the questions, we're looking for Dewey Decimal. Here we have HB, letters, that's going to be Library of Congress. Here we have JUV, letters, but that stands for juvenile. That is not a Library of Congress classification. So JUV, and then the thing following it is a 3-digit number. That means that this is indeed Dewey Decimal. LC, letters, Library of Congress. 345, 3-digit number, that is Dewey Decimal. Here we have JUV. Now again, that's not Library of Congress, that is just juvenile. But then right after JUV, we have PZ. PZ is letters, Library of Congress. So we're going to skip that one. And then here we have another subject is HG. It's preceded by BEST, that stands for our bestseller collection. Again, BEST, not a Library of Congress subject heading, but we see right after it there is the Library of Congress subject heading, meaning that this is also a Library of Congress book. So we've selected 2 Dewey Decimals. This one is a juvenile Dewey Decimal with a JUV. This is just a regular Dewey Decimal. Both of those should be pulled, put aside, and sent down to get fixed so that they can go onto our stacks as Library of Congress books. Now we're looking for the Library of Congress books. This is a 3-digit number right at the front. Sure sign that this is a Dewey Decimal. Here's another 3-digit number. That is another Dewey Decimal. Here we have letters, REF, but remember, REF is not a Library of Congress subject heading. This is reference. So since this is reference, we have to look after it, right after it, 3-digit number. This is also Dewey Decimal. We have to go down to this line where we see BEST. Again, remember this is just bestsellers, not part of Library of Congress classification. But then after BEST, we have PS, and that is a Library of Congress subject heading. And then finally we have faculty. This is another subject heading, or sorry, this is another location in our library, is the faculty, the faculty books. But after this we have more letters, QR, so we know that this is also Library of Congress. Basically what you need to do is memorize the very few number of special collections that we have and what the thing is that precedes those special collections, and then if you see that, don't count that as part of the regular call number. And here they are. So JUV for juvenile, BEST for bestsellers, faculty for faculty publications, for reference, CDs and DVDs, which are just CD and DVD. Okay, and we're going to hit next, and if any of those were wrong, that will be embarrassing. Okay, good, we're good. All right, now CDs and DVDs, these are special collections, but they are also not in Library of Congress classification. Everything else in our library should be at this point in time, but CDs and DVDs are not. You'll notice that their call numbers are quite short. We don't have a lot of either of them, so there's no need to have that whole long collection number, and we're not planning on getting more, so it's not like we really need more expansion space. This letter followed by 3 or 4 digits is just fine. And this is a cutter number, so this is actually taken from Dewey Decimal. Not that that really matters. But what does matter is that this is a decimal number. So this actually should be read as CD.M345. And that means that this is going to go before CDM35 and after CDM32 and 34. It's going to go after CDM34 as well. And then DVDs, it's the exact same formatting, it just says DVD on the front. So we're going to drag these CDs into order. I'm looking at this, I see that we have 3 different starting letters. We have an A, M's, we have 2 M's, and then we have 2 P's. So first in the alphabet is A, so I'm going to drag that up there. It doesn't have to compete with anything, it's the only A. Singing through the alphabet, M's come before P's, so I'm going to scooch these 2 up. We have CDM 135 and CDM 153. So this is just pretty easy counting. M 135 is less than 153, so we're going to leave it like that. Now we've got our P's. So remember that these are decimal numbers, which means that length doesn't really help. This is 4 digits, this is 3, but that doesn't tell us which number is bigger. And actually, if I imagine a 0 at the end here, so if I imagine CDP2420, then I will see that this number is larger than this one. Okay, because we're basically going from left to right. So from left to right, we have 2, we have 4, and then we have a 2 and a 0. So another way to look at this is just 2 is equal to 2, 4 is equal to 4. Oh, 2 is greater than 0, so this one is the bigger one, and it goes at the bottom. Okay, those are the CDs in order. Now we're going to go on to the DVDs. Again, I'm just looking through. I'm taking note of what letters are here. I see that there is just 1 B, so we're going to move that all the way to the top. And then following the B's, there are 3 C's. Let's just get those together. Okay, there are the C's. And remember, I'm reading this number from left to right. So reading from left to right, I see a 2 and a 2 and a 1. Okay, even though this number is more digits, we're moving it up to the top because 1 is less than 2. And then this is the only DVD CD1, or DVD C1. So I can just leave that alone, and then we're moving down to these. We have a 2 and a 2 and a 9 and a 9 and a 1 and a 2. So this one's going to go at the very bottom. That is the largest number, and this is going to be the last call number in the C's. And then we have an M and an N, and that's alphabetical order. All right. Now we've gotten through the CDs and the DVDs, let's focus the rest of our time on Library of Congress. So this is basically the same practice. We are moving from left to right, or on a real call number label, we would be moving up to down, from the top to the bottom, I should say. And so we're looking here, we have a P, a PA, and a PG. So alphabetically, we're going to put the P first because there's nothing following it. And then PA is going to come second because the letter A comes before the letter G, and then PG is going to come last. So for these three, even though these are pretty long call numbers, the only thing we ever had to look at was that letter at the very front, or those two letters. And that's done. Now we're going to move down here. So we have an A, an AC, and another A. Okay, so the two A's are going to go together, and the AC is going to go after them. And now we just have to look at these two A's. So we have an A13 and an A120. Now remember, in Library of Congress, this first number is a whole number. And that means that 13 is less than 120. All right, let's move on to the next one. So here we have ML 783, ML 783, and ML 783. So this one's a little bit trickier. We have to go further down the call number. So ML 783, point N, point N, point N, 0.6, 0.5, 0.5. Now remember, these are decimals. After this first decimal point, these are all decimals. So the length, the fact that this is 2 digits versus 1 digit, does not determine how big the number is. The first digit is all we need to look at here. 6 is greater than 5. 5 is equal to 5. So 6 is going to be last because point N6 is the greatest out of these three. Now we just have to compare these two. So we have point N56 and point N56. And then we see on this one, on the second one, there is a second cutter number, which is K125. This is also a decimal number, but we don't even have to worry about that because when we look up, we see that this first one doesn't have a decimal, or doesn't have a cutter number at all. We see N56 and then nothing, and then the date. So since something is greater than nothing, we have 1, 2, 3, that is in order. All right, finally, we have 3 PLs, so we have to move on to the number. Moving on to the number, remember this is a whole number, meaning that 405 is less than these other two. Now once we've gotten through that whole number, we see that these two have a decimal at the end. So we have 3263.6 and 3263.54. With decimals, we read from left to right, and we don't worry about the length of the decimal. So we're reading 6 and 5, and 5 is less than 6, so we move that up, and that should all be in order. Great. Next. Now we're getting into longer grouping of call numbers, but the concept remains the same. So here we have 3 M's and then 2 MLs. So what are we moving to the top? We're moving these M's up to the top. We're going to just move them up all together because they're not accompanied by another letter. Something is greater than nothing, so the MLs are going at the bottom. Let's compare these 3 M's to each other. Okay, so we have M, 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 and then we have 1,422, we have 1,422, and we have 142. Remember, whole numbers, so that 142 is much less. Following this, we have a decimal in this first whole number, but we don't need to worry about it because it's the only 142 in here. And then these two have a cutter number, which we do need to worry about because up to this point they're the same, right? They're 1,422 and 1,422. So moving on to the cutter number, we have point J23 and point J23. Still no difference, so we're moving on. Oh, this one has a second cutter number. Its second cutter number is C4. And remember, this is also a decimal, but this one doesn't have a second cutter number at all. So we don't even need to do decimal calculations. We can just move that on up because something, that point C4, is greater than nothing. Note that this one does not have a cutter number. It just has the date. Now we're moving on to the MLs. We have ML 145 and ML 1451. 145, we are back to those whole numbers. 145 is less than 1,451, so these are good as they are, like that. Next one. We have 3 HQs and 2 HVs. So alphabetically, the letter Q comes before the letter V, so I'm going to move these 3 up. And looking at them, I can see that it's HQ 452, HQ 452, and HQ 452. At this point, they are all the same. They have not diverged. We're moving on to that first cutter number. We have point L5, we have point L5, and we have point L5. They still have not diverged. Okay, that second cutter number, point M45, point M45, and point M45. Still no difference. Okay, so now we actually have to move on to the date. Up till this point, we have been ignoring the dates, but they are there, and they just go in numerical order. So we have 1972, 1971, and 1972. Well, 1971 comes first, so now we have these 2 1972s. And it looks like this is a 2-part work. We have volume 1 and volume 1, that's still the same, but then this one's part 1 and part 2. So just numerical order, part 1 is going to come before part 2. So we got all the way through that call number. That's pretty rare, but at the end it came down to something as simple as 1 is less than 2. Now we're going on to the HVs. This part is a little bit easier. So we have 2 HVs, but then we move on to that subject number, this whole number, and we see that 45 is way less than 5,240. So we're going to keep it just like that. All right, and the final problem on this page, we are looking at these. These are all B's, but note that the second letter is different. So we have a B unaccompanied that moves up to the top. Nothing is less than something. And then we have a BJ and a BL, JK, LMNOP. So J is before L. Sometimes I have to sing the alphabet too. So B, BJ, BL, QRSTUV, so BR, BV. And that's as far as we need to go. We do not need to go past those first subject letters. Even though these call numbers all look like they're pretty similar, actually these will be in very different places in the stacks because our B section is so large. And we don't need to even get past that first subject letter combination to see that these are all going in this order. All right, 2 pages left. Okay, so now we have a lot more call numbers to look at, but we are still doing the same process as before. So I'm looking through, I'm seeing that we have 2 D's. We're moving those up to the top. And then I'm looking through again and I'm seeing that we have an H, and I'm looking through again and I'm seeing that we have 2 P's and then a Q and an R. And then I'm moving from left to right. So we have 2 D's, so we have to compare these to each other. We have D810 and we have D769.8. So 769.8 is less than 810. Swapping those 2. Moving down, we just have 1 HT all by itself, so we are good there. We have an R, PQR, okay. I messed up somehow because I'm realizing this R should go down towards the bottom. R is later in the alphabet from P. So now we're on the P's. So we have 2 PZs, that's the same. We have 2 PZ 7.1s. Here's the difference. So PZ 7.1.H and PZ 7.1.R. Which comes first in the alphabet? H. So H is going to come first and then point R. All right, now we just have 1 QD, so we don't have to worry about the Q's at all. And then we have 2 R's, but this one is just R, and this one is RC. So again, something is greater than nothing, so this RC is going to be the one all the way at the bottom as the largest call number. So I've been solving these all in pretty much the same way. I do want to show you a different method of solving this. I think for this kind of format, it's less effective, but when you're shelving, it might be helpful. So we're going to start at the top here, and we're going to ask ourselves the question. We're going to just compare the two. It's almost going to be like a March Madness bracket, okay? So we're going to look here. We have two H's. We have an H and an HC. So HC is greater than H, so we're going to leave those as they are for now. Now we're going to move down here, and we have an HC and an AR. We're going to ask ourselves, is AR greater than or less than HC? AR is less than HC. A comes earlier in the alphabet than H, so we're going to move that up. And actually this one's also an H, so we're going to move that up twice. Now we're moving back down to this HC, and we're going to compare it with RA. Which comes first in the alphabet, HC or RA? HC comes first, so we're going to leave that as it is. Now we're moving down here. Which comes first in the alphabet, RA or AC? AC comes first in the alphabet. In fact, AC comes very early in the alphabet. We're going to have to keep on moving it up all the way past AR because it's even less than AR. We're going back to that RA now. Which comes first in the alphabet, RA or RA? Well, it's the same, so we have to continue. Which comes first in the alphabet, M or Q? I actually had to think for a second, but it's M. So this one comes first, and then this one. So now, which comes first in the alphabet, HA or RA? Well, HA comes first, comes before RA. It comes before this RA as well. It comes before this HC, but it does come after just regular H, so it's going to go right there. Now we have this RA, and we have finally AR. Which comes first? Well, AR comes before RA. It's earlier in the alphabet. It's earlier in the alphabet than everything except just perhaps this first AR. So now we have AR or AR. We have point J73 or point J73. We're all the same so far. We have C or K. C comes first, then K. We're going to leave it like that. So this is the second way to solve it. As you've seen, it's way less efficient when you have a worksheet like this, but when you are organizing a cart, for example, this is more like what my thought process is. Because the advantage of this is that you're moving things less. I only had to move a couple of these things, so I was doing way less clicking. I was doing a little bit more thinking. So we are going to do another one like that, even though in this format it is a little bit more tedious. Ultimately, when you are shelving or when you are organizing, you can do whatever works for you mentally. So here we have QC and N. We're going to do a lot of comparison between QC and N, so it's worth remembering right now the letter N comes before the letter Q in the alphabet, and knowing that, we're going to swap those two. Now we're comparing QC and QC, they're the same. Now we're comparing QC 981 and QC 981. They're the same, except this one has a 0.8 on it. So we're going to keep this one second because that decimal makes it a slightly bigger number. Now we're moving down QC or N, which comes first. We've already discussed N is first in the alphabet. Okay, which one of these comes first? We have N6537 and 6537, the same so far. And then we have point O and we have point L. Well, I guess we got to move this all the way up to the top. Circling back down to that QC 981.8, we are comparing it to this QC 981 point nothing. So that 0.8 is going to make that just slightly bigger, swapping those two. Now we're comparing it to another QC 981.8. So we have to just keep on going left to right. QC 981.8, point G 56, point G 578. We are still all the same until we get to that date at the very end. 2001 comes before 2006. And then we have another N. N's are before Q, so we're going all the way up to the top. N6537, the same. Point O39, both are the same. Point P, point M. Well, M comes before P, and M comes, looking up, well, actually it doesn't matter because this is, O comes after point L. So it also does not pass that one at the very top. And then we have this final N at the bottom. We're going to move it up we're going to keep on moving it up because I see that after that N 6537 we have an L, so we have two N 6537 point L's right here. This is a decimal number, so we're reading left to right. 5 and 5, 2 and 4. 2 comes before 4, so this is the proper order of this one. Next. All right, and we're going to go back to the first method to sort of puzzle through this one, okay? So these are all P's, first of all, but our P section is huge. Our P section takes up about half of the third floor, so just something being a P does not tell you where it is in the library. But if we move on to the second part of the subject line, so PR, PG, PR, PG, we can sort of sort them by that. So I'm going to move the PGs closer to the top. There's only two PGs, so we're good there. And then we have R, L comes between G and R. There's another L. R. Okay, we'll deal with that later. Let's just look at these two PGs. So we have PG 3,488 and PG 3,347. 3,347 is less. Now we've got the PLs. PL 825 and PL 8,903. These are whole numbers, remember, so that 825, way less. That gets us through the PLs. Easy so far. Now we have all these PRs though. So since these are all PRs, let's just move on to the subject number. So we have 1121, we have 1127, and actually I'm thinking, because this is so many, that it might actually be easier for me mentally to use the second method that I showed you. So we're just going to start with the subject number because we've established that these are all PRs. We're just going to start with the subject number and we're going to say 1121, 1127. So far these are in order. This one is less than that one. 1127, 1110. Swapping those. 1121, 1110. Moving that up to the top. Okay, now we have another 1121. I remember having a 1121. We're going to move that up so that they can be friends. Now we have PR 111. I know that is less than everything that I've seen so far, so I'm going to move that all the way up to the top of the PRs, that is. And now we're going to swing back down to here. PR 1121 again. Going to get that to join as friends. And then moving down, PR 1110, PR 1110. So these last two are both PR 1110. We're going to bring them on up to join their friends up here. And now we have just tiny little groups to sort between. So PR 1110, we are going to sort point W5 on top of these three because point W6 is slightly greater. And then we have 2 point W6s, so we're going to have to move on to this letter, and B comes first in the alphabet, followed by P, so these are good. Now we have these three PR 1121s, these here, and I can see going through this call number, this is basically all the same, 1121.E19, all the way up until the date. And then the date is even the same. It's 1996, 1996, 1996. Okay, so now we have to look at the volume number. There is a dot after the V for volume. That's because it's an abbreviation. But this is volume 10. So volume 10 is going to come after volumes 1 and 2. So this is not a decimal point. Don't be fooled. This is just abbreviating volume and then saying it is the 10th one. So it's going to come, presumably on the shelves, there's like 7 volumes between here that you would hit. And then PR 1127 is, of course, all the way at the bottom. So that is how to solve the questions on the practice. And now you're going to get a second practice, and you're going to do really good at it. Okay? All right.